I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. It was mid-September in Toronto, and the air carried a crisp chill that hinted at the arrival of fall. David Hamilton stood by his office window, looking out over the cityscape he had helped design. As an architect, he was used to seeing the world in terms of structure, balance, and stability. Ironically, that was exactly how he had always viewed his marriage. To him, his relationship with Rachel was the strongest foundation he had ever built. David had met Rachel 10 years ago in a cozy cafe near the University of Toronto. He had been fresh out of grad school, ready to start his career, and she was a charming marketing executive at a rising firm. Rachel, with her vibrant red hair and infectious laugh, had immediately caught his attention. They had an instant connection, one that seemed so effortless and natural, as if they had known each other for years. Rachel was ambitious, driven, and full of life. She was always the one to initiate plans, whether it was a spontaneous weekend trip to Niagara Falls or simply a late-night conversation about their dreams. It was one of the things David loved most about her sense of adventure, her energy. She was, in every way, the perfect partner for the life he had envisioned. Fast forward to today, David, now 38, was a respected architect at one of Toronto's top firms, and Rachel, at 35, had risen through the ranks in her company. From the outside, they appeared to be the perfect couple. They lived in a beautiful two-story home in Rosedale, one of the city's most affluent neighborhoods. They hosted dinner parties, traveled frequently, and always seemed to be in sync. But appearances, as David was beginning to realize, could be deceiving. It had been subtle at first. A few months ago, Rachel had started coming home later than usual. "Work's been crazy," she would say, dismissing any concerns with a casual wave of her hand. David, trusting as always, didn't push. After all, Rachel's job in marketing often required long hours, especially during product launches or major campaigns. But then there were the text messages, constant buzzing at all hours of the night. She'd glance at her phone, smile briefly, and then quickly hide the screen. David noticed but chose to ignore it. He loved Rachel, and he had no reason to doubt her. However, as the weeks passed, the distance between them grew. Their once lively conversations became short and surface level, and the intimacy they once shared felt strained, almost mechanical. It was when she started mentioning Mark that David's unease began to deepen. Mark Johnson had been a friend of theirs since college. He was charming, successful, and single, a businessman who had never settled down but always seemed to have a string of admirers. Rachel had known Mark even before she met David, and while David had never been the jealous type, something about the way she talked about Mark lately felt different. She'd laugh at his jokes a little too easily, bring him up in conversation without prompt, and seemed unusually excited when she mentioned running into him at work-related events. David brushed it off as paranoia. After all, they had known each other for years. Mark was a friend, a mutual one, and David trusted his wife. But doubt is a seed, and once planted, it grows. Their 10th anniversary was approaching. David had been planning for weeks, reservations at Canoe, one of Toronto's finest restaurants, followed by a surprise weekend getaway to a luxury resort in the Muskoka Lakes. It was meant to rekindle the spark, to remind Rachel of the life they had built together. That morning, David had woken up early, eager to surprise Rachel with breakfast in bed. He had bought her favorite croissants from a bakery downtown and brewed her favorite coffee. As he carried the tray into the bedroom, he found her sitting by the window, already dressed. "I have a meeting," she said, barely looking up from her phone. David's heart sank. "A meeting? It's our anniversary." Rachel finally turned to face him, an apologetic smile on her lips. "I know, David, and I'm sorry. This just came up last minute, but I promise I'll make it up to you tonight. We'll still have our dinner." She kissed him quickly on the cheek before grabbing her bag and heading for the door. David stood there, tray in hand, watching as his wife left on the day they were supposed to celebrate their love. Something was wrong. Deep down, he knew it. The doubt that had been quietly gnawing at him for months was now roaring to the surface. He put the tray down and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a wave of frustration, sadness, and confusion wash over him. For the first time in their marriage, he questioned whether he truly knew the woman he had vowed to spend his life with. Hours passed, and Rachel still hadn't returned any of David's messages. She wasn't answering her phone either, and her vague explanation about the meeting seemed more suspicious by the minute. The more David thought about it, the more he realized that something had to be done. He needed answers, and he couldn't sit in their empty house, pretending everything was okay. Impulsively, he decided to follow her. David's heart raced as he got into his car and drove towards downtown. He wasn't even sure where she might be, but something in him, a gut instinct, told him to check Mark's place. Mark lived in an upscale condo near King West, not far from Rachel's office. As he pulled into the parking garage beneath Mark's building, David spotted Rachel's car. His stomach lurched. She was here. For a few moments, he sat in the car, debating whether to confront her. A part of him didn't want to know. He wanted to hold on to the illusion that maybe this was all in his head, that Rachel was loyal, that their marriage was as strong as it had always been. But then he saw them. Rachel and Mark stepped out of the building together laughing, her arm casually resting on his. They didn't see David parked in the shadows, but he saw everything. His world came crashing down in that instant. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had built a life with, was walking hand in hand with another man. His friend, no less. The weight of the betrayal hit him like a tidal wave. It was real. The doubt that had plagued him for months was no longer just doubt. It was fact. David followed them, keeping a safe distance as they walked down the street, eventually entering a nearby restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a casual spot where they could be alone. He watched them through the window, his mind spinning, heart pounding. Every laugh, every touch, every shared glance between them felt like a knife twisting in his gut. He couldn't take it anymore. Pushing open the door to the restaurant, David walked straight to their table. Rachel's face drained of color when she saw him standing there, his eyes filled with hurt and fury. "David," she started, her voice barely a whisper. Mark, too, looked stunned, clearly not expecting this confrontation. David clenched his fists, trying to keep his voice steady. "How long has this been going on?" Rachel glanced at Mark, then back at David, guilt written all over her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but faltered, unable to form the words. "David, I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." Her words felt like poison. "You didn't mean for it to happen? You've been lying to me for months, Rachel. On our anniversary, no less. You're here with him instead of with me." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to find the right words. "David, Save it," David snapped. "I trusted both of you. You were supposed to be my friend." The room felt heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Rachel looked down at her hands, unable to meet David's gaze, while Mark sat in silence, guilt etched across his face. David's voice softened, though the pain was still palpable. "I loved you, Rachel. I thought we were happy. Was it all a lie?" She finally looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "No, it wasn't a lie. I loved you too. But somewhere along the way, I don't know. I changed. We changed." David stared at her for a long moment, trying to understand. But it was too late. The damage was done. The days following the confrontation were some of the hardest David had ever endured. He moved out of their shared home and stayed in a hotel while he tried to make sense of everything. The once perfect life he had built felt like a distant memory, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Rachel called, texted, begged for forgiveness, but David couldn't bring himself to respond. How could he? The trust that had been the foundation of their marriage was gone, shattered by betrayal. One evening, David found himself sitting by the lake, watching the sun set over the water. The orange and pink hues reflected on the surface, creating a peaceful, almost surreal scene. In that moment, he realized something important. Life would go on. He would heal. It would take time, but he knew he had the strength to move forward. Rachel's betrayal, as painful as it was, didn't define him. He had built a successful career, surrounded himself with supportive friends, and had a future ahead of him, one that wasn't tied to the past. David stood up, taking one last look at the sunset before turning to leave. He knew that despite everything, he would be okay. And that's how the story ends. What was once thought to be unbreakable shattered, yet in the ruins, there is always room for growth, for healing, and for moving forward. David learned that sometimes the hardest part of love is letting go. But in letting go, we find the strength to rebuild, stronger than before. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or thoughts about the story, I'd love to hear them. Please share your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.